NBA insider Brain Winhorst says he hasn't heard anything around a possible trade for Zach LaVine. We're going to be talking about what that means for the Chicago Bulls and the likelihood of them making a major trade this NBA season. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and welcome to another episode of Bulls Digest. And so today we're going to be breaking down this recent report around NBA insider Brain Winhorst and what he is saying about not hearing anything around Zach LaVine and him being moved despite him playing well. And so let's start with the fact that yes, Zach LaVine has played well, and I think that he's really shred a lot of the narratives that have been around him. Number one, people were saying that hey, he is not a player that really contributes to winning. I think that he's done a terrific job this year in showing that he can contribute to winning with the assist, and also too just playing off of others. There's been several games out there where he has let other players really take the lead, and then he's really been assertive down the stretch or really helped this team get close in games and things like that. So he is showing he has the ability to go ahead and let others go ahead and do work, and he can play off of them. So I think that he's doing a terrific job there. And I think that he's also doing a great job as far as really shredding that narrative of being injured as well. I know that it's going to take some time here, but thus far this season, he's looked very good. He's looked explosive when he's going to the basket. I think he's added another dimension to his game with that turnaround shot that he's been really having going this season. So I think he's looked good there. And then, you could just see the athleticism is still there. And so I think that he is definitely shredding that narrative about, just being injured. And plus, he's played through some little minor things as well, and it hasn't kept him out the lineup. And so that is another thing. And then defense. I think his defense has actually been solid this year. It hasn't been elite, but he's willing to take on some tougher assignments this year. He's definitely out there competing. And so I think that he's showing you he can play defense, he can play off others. His athleticism, his health has been there. So I think that he's really just going ahead and just, throwing those narratives out the window. And so I think that if you're looking at that and you're saying to yourself, am I going to trade for this player? I think that you definitely, it's not because of the narratives. I think that the bottom line now is it's more that teams are looking at the contract more than just his play. I think that they're viewing him more as a contract than his play on the court right now. And this is something that I think Brain Winhorst really talks about in his podcast, because what he said is in a podcast and is with NBA insiders to put this into full context. It's Brain Winhorst, then you also have Tim McMahon, and you also have Tim Bontemps as well. So those are both NBA insiders, and they're on a podcast. And so I like this article. You can go and see a lot of what they said on the podcast, and it also has a link to take you over to ESPN, and you can listen to the portion of the show where they talk about this. And I think that really the most important thing to take out of this is that it is going to be the aprons, like the first and second aprons that are now in the league with the salary caps. That is going to be the major issue with moving on from Zach LaVine. And so one of the things that they say here is that with these aprons, you now have situations where if you are in that first apron, then you cannot go out there and take in more money than you send out. That's number one. Then also, two, the other team is going to have to take more money in the deal. So you cannot take back more money, and then you're going to have to take it or get a team that's going to take in more money. That's if you're over that first apron. If you're over the second apron, and this is Brain Winhorst talking about these aprons, you go over that, then what's going to happen is you cannot take in more money. You also can't put players together to make a deal. The example that Brain Winhorst uses is that if you have a $30 million player that you want to trade for, then you need to have a $30 million player on your team to go ahead and make that trade happen. And that's if you're over that second apron. If you're under both of those, then that's great. But if you've gone ahead, you've used your mid-level exception, if you've gone off, you've made a sign and trade, then that is going to put you at a hard cap. And then also, too, if you've already taken in more money in a trade, then that is going to hard cap you as well. And so that is why teams are probably hesitant to go out and get Zach LaVine, and that it probably is why you are not hearing very much, or why I'd say Brian Winhorst is not hearing very much, because teams are just really hesitant to make a move. One of the things that I believe that Bontemps says in this podcast is that he talked to a GM, and according to this GM, a player that is most likely going to be moved would be a Cam Johnson because of his contract and because it is team friendly. I think he's making about $23 million right now, $23.6 million this year. And something like that is more acceptable for these teams as they operate with these aprons to go out there and get. And so, with Zach LaVine, it's going to be tough, because another thing that Brian Winhorst says in this is that he briefly goes through a couple teams in the situation that they have. And some of these teams are linked to getting Zach LaVine. We've heard about the Warriors. We've heard about the Lakers. We've heard about the Pelicans and the possibility of a Brandon Ingram situation. I think the Miami Heat, the Clippers, like these are all teams that, we've seen some mock trades for or heard the rumors. And so he's saying, look, with the Warriors, this is Brian Winhorst. He's like, look, they're at the first apron and they're hard capped there. You got the Clippers, they're at the first apron and they're hard capped. You got the Lakers, they're at the second apron and they're hard capped. You got the Heat that are under the second apron and they have the numbers to get up there. Then you have the Pelicans, they're right there at the first apron. And, with that being said, these teams are probably going to be reluctant to go out and get Zach LaVine unless they feel like it's going to be a real difference maker. So a team like the Warriors, the Lakers, Clippers, whatever, if they're going to make that deal, they're probably going to have to make that deal with putting a lot of chips on the table. And they're just thinking like, this has to be a player that is going to certainly get us to the title or get us over the hump and get us a title. I think that is really the type of teams that are probably going to go all in on Zach LaVine if it's going to happen this year. But what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing now from Brian Winhorst, just my personal opinion, it looks like that the Bulls might be having Zach LaVine on the team for the foreseeable future, because if teams are reluctant to go out there and get him now and they're looking to get a player that is in the $21 million range, then I think that Zach LaVine is he's priced out of the market. And now you have to ask yourself, okay, if the Bulls have a high asking price for him, and what is going to make a team go out there and get him? Like, even if you lower the cost, I don't know if a team's going to want to do that. And then on top of that, we talked about how Zach LaVine has played well. I don't know if he can play up his value anymore this season. I mean, I think that it has to be probably higher than it's been before with his trade value. And so that's another factor that I wonder about with this. And so, just going back into this Cam Johnson situation where they say that that's a contract that would likely be moved, then that means that the Bulls could possibly make a major trade still, but I think it's going to center around Vooch. And Vooch is in a contract where it's $20 million now. It's 21.4 the next season, or I think 24.4 or 24 and some change for the next season. But that's a contract that maybe makes a lot more sense. And it is just, can the Chicago Bulls really maximize that? We've heard, via the trade rumors and things like that, and Jake L. Fisher and these reports that maybe 2 second-round picks are a starting point. I wonder if Vooch can possibly play the value up more. Is it possible for the Chicago Bulls to maybe get a protected first-round pick? Is it possible for the Chicago Bulls to maybe get a decent player back? We know that they need some draft assets, and it would be great if they could get a pretty decent player back that, you could possibly maybe develop or build with. And so that's yet to be seen, but it looks like that maybe a Vooch trade is more likely versus a Zach LaVine trade. Now, a lot can change. If an injury happens or if a team just gets super hot and they feel like that Zach LaVine is going to be the answer, then I feel like that could be maybe the situation where they just go all in and try to get Zach LaVine. And so, we've been saying that this team's needed to pivot. I think aside from what Brain Winhorst had to say in this podcast, along with these other insiders, I think another thing that was interesting to note is when they're talking about Zach LaVine, and at that last line, it says, look, 2 years ago, the Mavericks, before they traded for Kyrie Irving, they were trying to get a trade with the Chicago Bulls for Zach LaVine, and the Bulls were not interested. And so I think that is probably maybe one of the more interesting things that's said there. And you just wonder where this team would be if they would have just maybe pivoted then, right? Because we didn't have the tax aprons or the aprons around these teams that we have now. And so it's going to be difficult. Another thing that they mentioned is that, for the next year and a half until the salary cap goes up, it's going to be challenging to make these type of trades mid-season. And so anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this recent news and this report from this podcast where Brain Winhorst is like, I'm not hearing anything. Is this something that we should be worried about as Chicago Bulls fans, that, hey, we might have to sit with Zach LaVine for some more time? Or do you think that somebody is going to swoop in and get Zach LaVine this season? Do you think that, yes, it is Vooch that actually is going to be the one that is going to be traded before Zach LaVine, and he's maybe the player that's going to be gone, and then Zach LaVine is maybe going to continue and maybe play out with the Chicago Bulls? Who knows? I'd love to know what your comments are, and let me know what you're thinking in the comment section here. And so just want to thank everybody out there for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the content. It means a lot to us here at Bulls Digest. We try to reach our humble goal of 5,000 subscribers by the end of the NBA season. Want to let you know about 69.4% of you that watch are not subscribed to the channel, so make sure that you go ahead and slam dunk on that subscribe button for us, as it means a lot as we try to reach that goal. And look, even though the Chicago Bulls very much need to make a trade, and a trade that is going to get this team in the right direction, because we know that this roster is not where it needs to be as far as roster construction. We also know that we're just not a team that is ready to be a serious threat to get out of the East and perhaps get to a championship, maybe even win the thing. Like, we still need to do some major things to this roster to get it there. And so, this is going to be a very critical decision for the Chicago Bulls. They've put it out there that, there's a lot of pieces that they might be willing to trade. And so I'm just hoping that the Chicago Bulls make the right decision here and get this team in the right direction. So even though we're unsure and we really are operating as a team that maybe just does not have a plan, I say this all the time, I'm still saying it anyway. Go Bulls. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.